Hello everybody. Today we are going to discuss a very important theme of the Indian history, that is pre-colonial Indian rural society approaches and interpretations. You know that in my YouTube channel I try to discuss some aspects of the Indian history in a lucid manner, in a very lucid language, so that everybody can understand it. Today's theme is extremely important because it produces huge amount of debate among the social scientists, among the historians. The social scientists have been engaged in debate for a long period about the nature of the rural society in the Mughal period. And we must have a very clear conception about the debate before starting any factual analysis of the rural society. This is the first point that we should remember. And we should also remember that the Mughal state was a pre-capitalist state. It was a feudal state. It was a land-based empire, and under the modern capitalist condition, the distance between state and the society is very limited. The existence of the influence of capitalist state could be felt even in the rural structure. One cannot ignore state under the capitalist condition. On the contrary, if we study the feudal state structure, we find that it was impossible for a feudal state to establish a total domination over the society, especially over the rural society. In other words, the society always enjoys relatively greater amount of freedom or independence or autonomy in the feudal society in comparison with the capitalist one. The society is able to retain its autonomy in a feudal social structure to a great extent. The relative autonomy of the feudal society in relation to the feudal state gives birth to the long debate among the social scientists. We can explain the debate from two distinct but interconnected angles within the universal theoretical perspective of feudalism. The first factor is the nature of the Mughal state. The second factor is the nature of the rural society. We must remember that it was not the historians or the social scientists initiated the debate on the nature of the Mughal rural society or the rural society under the Mughal Empire. It was not the social scientists. The first people who started the discussion were the British colonial administrators or the bureaucrats or the officials. The primary motive came from the company's concern about the formulation of a stable land revenue policy in colonial India. The colonial administrators of the English East India Company quickly realized the fact that without an understanding of the nature of the rural society of the Mughal era, it would not be possible for them to formulate the required land revenue policy. The company also had a second objective. They wanted to find out a class which would support them, which would extend their support or which would collaborate with the company in the Indian rural social structure. The company officials made extensive experiments with the land revenue system in India, and the result was that we got actually three types of land revenue systems in India: the permanent settlement, the Rayatwari settlement, and the Maholwari settlements. And during these experiments, the company officials or the company bureaucrats, they studied extensively about the nature of the Mughal rural society. They extensively studied it, and they produced first the knowledge about the Mughal society, Mughal rural society. From this study, from this extensive study, one new notion emerged in colonial India, that is the colonial epistemology. It was the formulation of the colonial epistemology in the post 1765 period, that is the grant of Dewani. The two fundamental factors were there. First, the effort of the company for expansion and consolidation of the British rule in India. Secondly, the initiative of the company officials to formulate a land revenue policy fulfilling completely the interest of the company. The colonial epistemology began its early journey through the study of pre-colonial Indian society and economy. The colonial compulsion produced this new genre of epistemology, the primary objective of which was to expand, consolidate, and legitimize the British rule in India. The British administrators, officials, the bureaucrats, they discussed in long detail about the nature of the Indian society, especially the village society during the Mughal period. Here we will like to highlight the fundamental arguments of the discussion and analysis made by the British colonial officials. In this context, we also remember that the colonial administrators indeed invented, I repeat the word invented, they invented the Indian village society in pre-British India while discussing the nature of the Indian rural society. The most prominent bureaucrats who contributed in this discussion were Thomas Munro, C.T. Metcalfe, John Malcolm, and H.S. Mayne. According to this study, the production of knowledge by the colonial administrators, the Indian village society had certain distinctive features. Now, what were the features? First, there was complete absence of right of private property in land in this society. Secondly, the village society was completely isolated from the outside world, totally isolated from the outside world. It did not have the requirement to maintain any relationship with the external forces or external organization. Thirdly, the Indian village society was self-sufficient. It did have hardly any dependence on the outer world. It implies that there was little demand of the commodities produced beyond the village society. Fourthly, it was a changeless society. It experienced little changes over the years. From this analysis, it is clear that these four features of the Indian village society of the pre-capitalist era were interconnected with each other. And this Indian village society was a universal reality in the eyes of the colonial bureaucrats. And these views could be found in the government documents and reports in detail. In this context, it should be remembered that Europe in general and England in particular during this period made rapid advancement in terms of industrialization and related social changes. These changes were the results of the Industrial Revolution, especially in England, and it resulted to the dissolution of the old rural structure and establishment of an advanced industrial capitalist society in England. Now, it was an opportunity before the colonial administrators that they now can study comparatively. They can make a comparative study of the British society, which was experiencing certain kind of changes, profound changes, and the Indian society, which was unchanging, which was immobile society, which was stagnant society. So it was an opportunity before them to study in a comparative manner, and it not only broadened the limits of the epistemology of the colonizers, but it itself became a very powerful apparatus of the colonial expansion. I would like to repeat this point. This comparative approach developed by the colonial administrators, it broadened the limits of the boundary of the colonial epistemology. But not simply that, it was more grave. The point is that the second point is more important. It very quickly became a very powerful apparatus of the British colonial administration or British colonial structure. A section of the colonial bureaucrats, they constructed the idea of the Indian village society from a very, very romantic point of view. They described this society as an ancient organization which was able to survive for a very long period and in a changeless manner. The primary reason of this permanence was its ability to resist the penetration of the external forces. The internal cohesion of the society was so significant, so articulate that it contributed to the development of a permanent kind of structure in our country, in India, in the pre-colonial period. However, we must note that it was a stratified society. It was stratified, but we should also point out that in this context that it was not a society of antagonistic classes. There was no class antagonism or class conflict among the social classes. In fact, there were no social classes within this society. It was a kind of classless society. However, it was a stratified society. It was a society of mutually dependent groups. I again repeat this point. It was a society of mutually dependent social groups. And this mutual dependence was another factor which contributed to the permanence of this society. And the fundamental elements of this society were the collective ownership of revenue payment. Revenue payment was collectively, they paid revenue collectively, the villagers. The cooperative management of the agricultural production system. They produced collectively as far as agriculture was concerned. And the mutually convenient exchange system of goods and services. There were exchanges between goods and services, but it was based on mutually convenient system. Everybody accepts this system. And there was another very important factor, that is, there was mutual consensus. And it played a very vital, important and significant role in developing unanimous opinion within the villages as far as religious and social beliefs were concerned, as far as rituals and practices were concerned. Undoubtedly, there was social inequality within this society. Nevertheless, it was very important again, nevertheless, this inequality could not have the capability to destroy the social cohesiveness or the social fabric. Here, we realize that it was not a modern type of society, rather it was a society based on status, and it was definitely a hierarchical society. And the primary basis of the society was mutual consensus, mutual understanding of everything, of any decision. And the manifestation of any personal interest was exceptional in this society. Nobody accepted any kind of personal manifestation of interest. And the classic example or the classic representation was made by Metcalfe in 1832 when he wrote to the Select Committee that the Indian villages were retail republic. These village societies were independent of external pressure. These changes, that is the rise of the empire, fall of the empire, the great battles, the treaties, the revolution, nothing could alter or change the Indian village society. In 1871, Mayne published a very famous work on the Indian village society. The name of the title of the book is Village Communities in the East and the West. And in this book, Mayne tried to understand the nature of the Indian village society, and he came to the same conclusion like Metcalfe. The conclusion of Metcalfe and Mayne was identical, but the methodology that Mayne followed was entirely different from that of Metcalfe. The method which Mayne used came to be known as comparative philology, and the German philological theory influenced to a great extent this person. The German philologists, they opined that the past could be found in the words and languages. It is therefore possible to know the history of any society or nation from the comparative analysis of language and words. Being influenced by this comparative philological method, Mayne gave his effort to analyze the Indian rural society, and he searched history within words. According to Mayne, the roots of the Indian and the European civilization was same. The roots were same. The Indian village society was reflection of the ancient Europe. The present Europe is the future of India. India is past of Europe. One can guess the pattern of ancient European and Indian civilization if the village society of India is studied. While the Indian society remained stagnant, Europe witnessed changes. It is not true that Maine only analyzed the stagnant character of the Indian village society. He also made it clear that Indian village society was a part of the broader Indo-European civilization and it was not simply a European one. It is not true that Maine only analyzed the stagnant character of the Indian village society. He also made it clear that Indian village society was a part of the broader Indo-European civilization and it was not simply an Indian one. And this analysis of Maine broadened the sphere of discussion or sphere of approaches as far as the Indian rural society or Indian village society during the Mughal period was concerned. Now, it was because of Maine's contribution, the Indian village society became a part of the Indo-European civilization. This is the very basic argument produced by the bureaucratic officials of the English East India Company in the decade of 1820s, 30s, 40s, even in 1870s. There was another type of argument which was very significant for our understanding. This argument regarding the nature of the Indian village society was given by Karl Marx. During 1850s, Marx first thought or started thinking about the Indian village society. Before Marx, it was Hegel, the famous German philosopher. He also had some idea about the nature of the Indian village society. And Hegel believed that the Hindus had no history and there was no element contributing to the growth of political structure in India in the Mughal period. Marx developed the same kind of argument when he stated that Indian society has no history, at least no known history. What we call its history is but the history of the successive intruders who founded their empires on the passive basis of that unresisting and unchanging society. Please note these words. Indian society has no history. Unresisting, unchanging society. It implies that to Marx, India has no history, India had no history before the coming of the British colonial power and the society was unchanging over the years. Marx actually collected his all data from the contemporary reports, books produced by the colonial administrators, the parliamentary debates. He studied very carefully James Mill History of British India, the Fifth Report, etc. And he also studied Manusmriti, translated by William Jones, and the accounts of the foreign travelers. And he tried to explain the nature of the pre-colonial Indian society on the basis of the data collected from these accounts. Marx believed that Indian village society had some kind of characteristic features. Now, what were the features? First, there was union of agriculture and handicrafts. In this social structure, the labor power of both agriculture and handicrafts worked collectively on the basis of mutual cooperation. Secondly, there was no right of private property in land. Right of private property in land was absent in the Indian village society. Land was a communal property. As there was no private property, there were no social classes and consequently there was no class struggle. The state was distant from society. The state normally did not interfere in the social customs. On the other hand, society was also indifferent about the state policy. As a despotic state, it did not have any dependence on the society's consent regarding formulation of any policy. It implies that there was a a huge distance between the society and the state. These are the basic features of the Indian village society according to Karl Marx. We find that there are apparent similarities between the interpretation produced by the Indian bureaucrats, colonial bureaucrats, and Karl Marx. However, in reality, the differences were profound. It is true that Marx also considered the Indian village society as stagnant and changeless, like the bureaucrats. Marx, however, never legitimized this society from a romantic point of view, as the British official did. While the British officials, they applauded this type of society as little republic, Marx, on the contrary, characterized it as a stagnant structure based on the caste system and slavery. And this stagnant caste-based system, social system, it acted as the very foundation of the Oriental despotism. This is the very fundamental difference between the position of the colonial administrators and the position of Karl Marx, position taken by Karl Marx. Marx tried to understand the question of ownership of land and the use of labor power in the broader context of the mode of production. You please note that the idea of mode of production was absolutely absent in the writings of the colonial administrators. Marx applied this concept here. He tried to understand the ownership of land and use of labor power in the context of the mode of production. He identified this mode of production as Asiatic or Asiatic mode of production, the Asiatic mode of production. The British officials did not refer to the question of mode of production in their writings. They were concerned only about the superstructure of the village society, while Marx tried effectively to understand the deep structure and the social basis of production. This is the very fundamental contribution of Marx as far as the Indian village society was concerned. And Marx held that the Asiatic mode of production contributed to the birth of the Indian village society in India. And this mode of production denotes the class differentiation was negligible or immensely underdeveloped or marginal, and consequently class struggle did not exist in such societies. And there was also significant union of agriculture and handicrafts. And this union of agriculture and handicrafts was the foundation of the Indian village society. There was hardly any capital accumulation in this social structure due to two factors. The villagers had no dependence on the external worlds, they had no demand. Level of demand was highly low, and the union of agriculture and handicrafts made this society self-sufficient. The almost absence of development of capital and labor or capitalist relationship or labor relationship made the social structure stagnant and completely changeless. Now, what is the significance of Marx's ideas? Why should we read Marx even now? The interpretation of Marx is significant from two different angles. First, Marx clearly mentioned the power of the state. It was the Oriental despotism or the power of the Oriental despots or the power of the state. He mentioned it very clearly, and it was unquestionable power. It was state enjoyed uncontrolled power in the Mughal era. Marx clearly referred to this particular point. Secondly, society also enjoyed communal ownership on land. In general, the state did not interfere in this right of society. It implies that the state and society, they made a very clear distinction, and they made a very clear distinction about their own rights, and it was a very distinct sphere of rights. State never interfered in the social customs or rituals or for that matter religious beliefs. State never interfered in this area of society, and society enjoyed its communal ownership of land. Society did not have again any power to control the state power. They did not have any capability to control the state power. State was actually independent of society, and there was a great distance between state and the society, and all these elements made the society stagnant and immobile, and land was not even beyond this power. However, in Marx's analysis, the Indian village society was not completely immobile. Marx believed that there was some amount of mobility within the Indian village society. How did he prove it? According to Marx, there developed ruling class in two layers of the social structure. Despite the immature development of class structure, the Indian village society produced ruling classes, which were successful in appropriating the social surplus from the agriculture. Another aspect of Marx is highly important. Though he argued that there was hardly any development of class structure in the Indian village society, Marx nevertheless recognized the importance of caste in the Indian society and in the production system. This dialectical approach of Marx and the question of social mobility will definitely help us today for our understanding of the Indian village society. And if we go through the modern researches on the Mughal society, on the society during the Mughal period, we find that the modern researchers tried to interpret Marx from their own angles, and they actually developed and expanded Marx's ideas towards new area of analysis and towards new frontiers. So it was without Marx, it is very difficult to understand properly the Indian village society. I thank you again. I provide a short bibliography for the advanced readers. I hope you will enjoy this video. It will be of help to you, all of you. And if you have not yet subscribed my channel, please do subscribe it and press the bell icon so that you can get the notification of my video very quickly. Thank you for watching. Thank you again.